Come on in, guys. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome to All Things Water. H2O is on everybody's mind, is what we're talking about tonight. Come on in, come on in, come on in. My name is Jeff Howard. Sarah is in Ireland, and so she is a little jet lagged, I believe. So I am in charge of this fantastic panel of people that are so smart, I don't even know I can pronounce their last names. They're that good. But before we start, I want you guys to all look down at the share screen button, which should be in the middle. I want you to open it or the chat button, excuse me, and I want you to type in where you're from. So open up the chat button, type it to the side, and let me know where you're from. Good evening, guys. Good evening. Good. We got California, San Diego, New Jersey. Hi, Ashley. Come on. Virginia, Jersey, Chicago, Georgia, Tampa. You had a big game in Georgia. Virginia, good, good, good. Alabama. Good, good, good. From all over, all over. Awesome, awesome, awesome. You guys, during tonight, if you have a question that you hear that you need to get answered, my panel, if you type it in, my panel will definitely address it for you. And if not, I'll bring it up as a topic as well. Tallahassee, Tennessee. Good, good, good. Tonight is all about water. When you feel thirsty, especially during a workout, it's already too late. Hydrating properly helps to maintain aerobic performance, improve muscular performance, and avoid overheating. Join our panel of experts that discuss how to stay hydrated and why it's important to do so. I'm going to introduce the panel real quick. The beautiful woman amongst us thorns is Dr. Samantha Davis. She is a former collegiate athlete and doctor of physical therapy, passionate about helping others achieve optimal health. She has a degree in biology and 10 years experience in physical therapy. She is certified in Selective Functional Movement Assessment, Functional Movement Screening, Instrumental Instructed Soft Tissue Mobilization, and Therapeutic Cupping, a co-owner of Shape Enterprise LLC. Dr. Sam is also certified Xtreme, hip hop master trainer. I've done a panel with her before. She knows more than I'd like to admit. Then we have Alex Bryce, who I've done a couple of panels with. He holds a master's degree in exercise science with an undergrad degree in strength and conditioning in sports nutrition. He is a certified strength and conditioning specialist from the National Strength and Conditioning Association. And then Pete McCall, who I go way back with, is the host of All About Fitness podcast, author of several articles, textbook chapters, and books, Ageless Intensity, Effective Workouts to Slow the Aging Process, and
plug.
The Science of Exercise Made Simple, okay? So we've got a great panel. My name is Jeff Howard. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's all I got. I've been in the business way too long, and I am very pleased with tonight's panel. They're very, very smart. And during it, by the end of the panel, I'd love for my panel to put in how they can get a hold of you if they'd like to, and websites and all that good stuff, okay? But let's dive right in. How should you discuss hydration with your clients? Dr. Sam, let's start with you. How do you discuss?
Well, thank you so much for that warm intro and getting us started. Definitely hydration is super important with our clients. So for me, I try to make it more reliable and connected to their why. Like a lot of times people are more compliant when you tell them why they need to do something versus just telling them to do something. I mean, when you can really lay it out and say, you know, if you want better performance, if you want to feel better, you want to drink more water. If you want your body to work in an optimal state, you're going to want to be hydrated. It's just our biology, we're made up of about 60% of water. So it's definitely super important, and just making it more clear and more fun, you know, different things and different challenges. I'll challenge my clients and patients to water challenges and, you know, just make it fun.
Dr. Sam, you had mentioned something in 8x8.
Yes. So
what is this?
So my 8x8 times 8x8x8. It's just a little challenge that I'll, you know, give my clients. There's really no one recommendation for how much water a person should have. There's so many factors that really play into the amount of water you should have. But in general, we lose 2 to 3 liters a day. So we definitely want to replace that at least. It's going to have factors depending on your environment, how much activity you have, even gender. But my 8x8x8 gets people started. It gets them thinking, okay, I can do this, drink 8 glasses of 8 ounces of water by 8 p.m. Can I do that? I challenge them. I check on them, throughout the day, how many ounces you add. And, it just makes it more fun. A lot of people are competitive when you give them like a challenge.
I love that. I love that. 8x8x8. Pete, how do you discuss hydration with your clients?
It's just that you have to do it first. I should say thanks for always good to be with you, Jeff. Always good to see the other first time with Doc Sam. Good to see Alex again. Except why he left San Diego, I don't know, man. We'll have to have an intervention with you on that. But I think the thing is, number one, I think a lot of people are aware of hydration. I think that's gotten better over the past number of years. And what I really try to get people thinking about is anytime the temperature is going to be higher than about 10 degrees above normal. Like right now in San Diego, it's a little bit hotter than normal. It's a few degrees hotter. We're having our mid-September heat wave. And that's always when I get concerned, because once we get acclimated to a certain temperature, we kind of get used to it. And having been in fitness for so long, drinking water is second nature to me. And I just try to get people to think about just staying hydrated. It's easy to say here, but it really, anytime I know the temperature is going to spike more than 10 degrees above normal or 10 degrees above normal or more, I really try to encourage people, hey, just drink extra water, because you might not be aware of it, but that extra 10 degrees, if you're not used to it, can make a big difference in how your body thermoregulates.
I love that. And Alex, how do you break it down with your clients?
Well, so much of my focus is on their hydration when they aren't exercising. For general population, because athletes are a little bit of a different story, but for most people, the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is more of a behavior change or a consistent lifestyle factor of just having, whether a blender bottle works well because they're labeled, so they at least have some rough estimate of how much they're actually consuming, but just this should be your companion. Have something that has water in it with you all day, every day. And it's that consistency throughout the day, as opposed to thinking, oh, I just exercised, I sweated a lot, well, now I need to chug. And the more we can be consistent with it, like Dr. Sam had said, that the respiration factor is huge, where you're going to be losing liters plural per day, regardless of whether you exercise or not. And our thirst is not a reliable indicator. By the time you're thirsty, like Jeff had said within the introduction, it's already too late. You've already lost enough of a percentage of your body water, because only about 2% total loss is enough to significantly impact performance, and you're thirsty after that. So by the time you're thirsty, you've already potentially impacted your performance. And the more we can do from a 24/7 type of mindset, having water next to your nightstand when you go to bed, drinking water as soon as you wake up, if we can just build it in, like Pete had said, making it second nature, that's when it's really going to be just a box to check and a much simpler part of your lifestyle.
I love that. I love it. But now, yes, go ahead, Sam.
I love to add too, those, like when I tell people drink right before you eat as well, because that can help manage the hunger craving, helps with healthy hydration and getting them going. And then also the flask. Like I love my flask. Definitely having some water with you. I'm totally on board with that, Alex. So
I love that. I love it. So now we've got them, but before we actually came on, guys, we were talking about, our clients are always walking with their bottles of water. Is there any difference with a bottle of water that they buy that's already pre-made and tap water? Or is it the same? Or what do you prefer? Where do you guys recommend to your clients? Alex?
Well, it very much depends on where you live in terms of tap water. There are some people where, unfortunately, tap water isn't safe to consume. But in the event that it is safe and you are somewhere where it isn't hard water, or you aren't dealing with contaminants or issues like that, there really doesn't tend to be all that much of a difference. And I'm normally not pushing bottled water simply because of the environmental impact of that much plastic. So as long as you are somewhere safe where the drinking water, the groundwater, whatever it is readily available. And normally if that's a problem, like Flint, Michigan was an example I used before the recording started, you're going to know that you're in an area where it isn't safe. In most cases, it's sort of 6 up, half a dozen down from a quality standpoint.
Right.
I love that. I love that. And so then how do you know if it's enough water? So we're telling our clients to do like the 8x8 or whatever. And people are always like, they're walking around with their big jugs. How can you tell if they are well hydrated?
I'll go, sorry, I'll cut it, urine color. And I think that's also something we have to be comfortable, but we have part of it, and then our excretory system is part of our body. And so one thing I'll say this, especially when it's going to be hot, I mean, we're coming off of summer into fall, but when I talk about it, especially in cycling classes, is if you're partially dehydrated, your urine becomes more yellow, it becomes thicker, it looks like a dark lemonade. And when you're well hydrated, your urine is very light, very pale colored. And that's when, I mean, you can tell. The funny thing is, so people might know Exos, and Exos is a facility, have a facility here in Carlsbad. They train players through the NFL. They get players ready for the NFL draft combine. And when you go into the bathrooms, I haven't been in the women's bathroom, but I'd have to imagine they're on the back of the stall doors. But when you go into the urinals in the men's bathroom, there are urine charts above every urinal that has clear, like it's well hydrated and dark dehydrated. And that's for the athletes, because they have athletes there training hours a day. And that sounds kind of silly, but to have that right there on the wall in an athletic facility is a smart thing to do. So, I mentioned that, and especially for those of you, there are a couple people in the South, and Jeff, you're in Kentucky, and both Alex and Doc Davis are in Virginia, which gets very, very humid. It's important to give people, hey, just a little notice. If you notice your urine getting darker and it started getting miscolored, that's a sign of dehydration. And to Alex's point, if you lose 2% of body weight in water, you're already in the hole, and that takes a while to come out of that.
I love that.
And then on the flip side of that, if your water is if your urine is too clear, that's a problem too. I know you mentioned it being too dark, but yeah, it should be like a yellow tint. And a lot of people think that, oh, it's good, my urine is clear, there's just no color at all. And that's actually not the case. Your urine should have that yellow tint. If it's super clear, you may be getting rid of important nutrients that your body actually does need. So definitely all about balance.
I love that with everything, I think. So then there's also clients that come to you and they say, well, I don't like water. I don't like to drink water. So what is your response to that, Pete? Let's hear Pete.
That's like, I'm sorry. Your body, I mean, people already made this point, your body's a majority water. And that quote in there is absolutely right. It's like, if you don't like water, those are people who are looking for excuses for why they're not getting results. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't do, as a personal trainer, I work with the muscles, I work with physiology. I don't work with between the ears. And if somebody has that kind of misbelief, but in all seriousness, then it's like, okay, what do you like to drink? The point is, like, just for people that are on, I just did an 8 to 9 mile mountain bike ride. So I'm rehydrating. I have a sports drink in here that I watered down, and I'm rehydrating with water. But because you don't need the sports drinks, you're going to urinate that out and it's high calorie. But I can understand people want a little flavor to it, but again, I just think it's like, come on. I mean, it's a functional thing. If you're working on your fitness, drinking water is part of fitness. I don't have patience for that. Sorry.
Okay. So Dr. Sam, do you have a little bit of a
more nuanced?
I definitely understand where Pete's coming from. I'm kind of like, it's something you need to do. It's just one thing that it's like brushing your teeth in the morning. If you want to have healthy teeth and, you don't want to have bad breath, you're going to do that. So you really need to kind of understand the importance of water. And there are some things you can do to help flavor it. If you're that person that just hates the quote unquote taste of water, to me, it doesn't have any taste. It's just nice and good. But, adding a little lemon may help people, get some of that water down. Doing little things like that, adding some fresh fruit to your water is definitely an option. That's going to also help you with your water intake because, as we already discussed, certain fruits and vegetables have water. So those are little things that you can do that are healthy and natural, but, just make sure it's naturally going to help you stay hydrated because your body just needs it to thrive.
So Alex, we have clients that come to us and say, well, a liquid's a liquid. A liquid's a liquid. I'm getting a liquid in me. It doesn't matter that it's water. It has water in it. Let's say it's coffee. Or let's say it's one of those new carbonated beverages that have a caffeine background or something. What do you then say? Or do you accept that? How do you communicate that with your clients?
Well, when I get pushback on I don't like water, my normal response is that's like saying I don't like air. You know, it's really just not, it's ubiquitous and it's a necessity. You know, I don't like brushing my teeth like Dr. Davis said, or flossing either, but I do it every morning. And the coffee aspect, you know, I drink coffee daily. So that essentially doesn't count. You know, the people who typically don't want to drink water are consuming just coffee in the morning and, you know, wine at night, and that's about it. I did see a comment quickly that caffeine dehydrates you. Caffeine itself does not. Caffeine itself is not a diuretic, but coffee, it's as you know, the entire black coffee is. So that's an important distinction, because if you're drinking something like Jeff had mentioned, a caffeine beverage or a water that's enhanced with caffeine, that in of itself will not be a diuretic. Alcohol absolutely is. And so, you know, trying to count your glass of wine at dinner, that's actually a net negative in terms of your hydration status. In some cases, you know, like Dr. Sam had said, whatever gets them drinking more water, if it does require some additives or even those silly Mio squirts, or, you know, obviously fruit itself is going to be ideal, but if it gets more of the pure, so to speak, beverages in on a regular basis, hey, whatever helps you stick to keeping your pee that lighter color. That I ask my clients all the time, and at first they're uncomfortable with it, but I'm the weirdo walking around saying, hey, what color is your pee? Hey, what color is your pee? Because it is the simplest way to monitor it. And there's no fooling it, with the exception of if you consume multivitamins, sometimes it can be a little bit fluorescent. But I used to work at Exos, so it's great that Pete mentioned that. And yeah, they're everywhere on the bathrooms. And one of my advisors at UConn was a heat environment exercise expert, and one of the first people who really popularized a 1 through 10 scale as a reliable field measure. It's as simple as it gets. You look down, and that tells you whether you're in a good state or not, and whether you need to drink more water or not.
Okay, so somebody asked about, does seltzer count as water? Dr. Sam?
Water is water. And that's what I would say to anybody. H2O, the chemistry of water is water. So you need an amount of that per day. All of the other liquids may be an extra bonus, but water is water.
Okay, then Michael asked, is drinking branch chain amino acids beneficial during exercise? Pete, do you know, or?
I was looking at that. That's a good question. I've seen studies where it's not necessarily for hydration, but it's more, it can help with tissue. I think it can help with tissue repair post-exercise. That might help speed up the recovery process. But in terms of pure hydration, I mean, BCAAs, I'm not sure if that makes much of a difference. I'd probably defer to Alex on that one.
Yeah, they really don't make much of a difference. Again, if the flavoring of whatever supplement you're using is going to help you consume more water, then it can have an indirect benefit. But BCAAs in and of themselves have no benefit from a pure hydration status standpoint. And if we're looking at something, you know, supplements should be a supplement, right? It's a little bit outside the scope of this topic, but I think it's important to discuss, because the question on supplements is not just do they work, it's also, are they worth the money? And in the case of BCAAs, it's a resounding no. Compared to whole or complete protein sources, BCAAs are wildly inferior. And they're better than nothing. You know, when you have literature that examines BCAAs with no protein consumption, yeah, of course, that's going to be a little bit better. But having only BCAAs without the rest of the amino acid profile, the analogy I'll use for people is essentially putting the keys in a Ferrari and there's no gas. It's not going to actually upregulate muscle protein synthesis. And there's a lot of misleading marketing still to this day with BCAAs, because there's an FDA loophole where if the protein source comes from non-complete sources, you don't have to report it. There's a lot of BCAAs that claim they're 0 calories. No, they're not. They have just as many calories as any other protein source. And so, you know, really, unless you're getting them for free somehow, really not worth it.
I love that. I love it. So we're kind of talking about supplements. So let's hit one of the questions real quick. It says, how important are supplements in your plan to keep clients hydrated? How important are supplements in your plan to help keep clients hydrated? Dr. Sam?
I think natural supplements are a good idea. I mean, if you're having an issue with certain compounds in your body, like magnesium and things of that nature, magnesium, like I said, is an important electrolyte to help with hydration. So if you need that, if your body needs that, and you went to your physician and your blood work says that you're deficient in certain things, to get that naturally, yes, but artificial supplementation, I'm not a big proponent of. I'm more of, give your body what it needs. If it's lacking something there, if you can't get it in food, which generally we can get a lot of the nutritional value that we need in some of our foods, food first, always, try to make sure you get those electrolytes through using certain foods. But if you're just not getting it there, then it may be a good idea to have those natural type of supplements. Like I love muscadines, ginger, turmeric, ashwagandha. Those are some of the natural things that I use to really help, keep internal health going. But it just really depends on the person and what they need and what they may be lacking in their diet.
Do you want to add anything?
Well, no, I like that because, if natural food sources first, and then what Alex says is I agree 100%. Supplements are just that, supplements. They're not meant to replace. The interesting thing is there are now services out there. Viome is one where you can do a gut biome test to find how your body's consuming nutrients, and Inside Tracker does blood testing to see how your body's consuming nutrients. And both those companies are starting to have services with personal trainers. So if you have a client, for example, Jeff, if you're my client and you do a test through Viome, you can give me access to your results so I can kind of see what it recommends. And what they're doing is they're looking at different markers in your gut bacteria to see where you're good, where you might need to improve a little. So I think as we go forward, we get so much more data now we can get so much more data about our body. But then at the end of the day, I mean, if you're not eating nutritious food, if you're not eating fresh fruits and vegetables to begin with, all that stuff is a little superfluous. It doesn't really matter that much. But I look at it as it all kind of, what's your focus? What are you training for? And where is your priority? I think first thing, number one, is you just got to be consistent about everything you do before you really start tweaking anything with supplements or anything like that.
I love that, Pete. Alex, you want to add anything? Or
Yeah, a little bit. I think they both absolutely hit the nail on the head. A well balanced diet. If you're just regularly consuming fruits and vegetables, consuming high quality protein sources, you're going to be checking all your boxes from in a sort of electrolyte standpoint, if we're looking at sort of the big overall category, right? Some of the big ones being, although there are others, but three that I really place an emphasis on being sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And when we're dealing with sort of general population, again, if you're consuming fruits and vegetables, you're going to be checking all of your boxes there. Like Pete had said, what changes is why are you training? How much are you training? If you're dealing with athletes or if you're dealing with, really hot environments, then things are going to change. And I work with ultra endurance athletes. So running 100+ mile events, they're crazy. And a lot of combat athletes as well, where we're having tons and tons of sweat loss during training sessions. In a situation like that, they actually may need extra, in particular, sodium to replenish what's lost in sweat. And for myself personally, I have a very, very high sweat rate. And unfortunately, I have an intolerance to a lot of raw fruits and vegetables, long story, but I do tend to need to consume magnesium and sodium exogenously because I can't quite get as much of it as I need from my diet. For somebody who's running 100-mile events, they need extremely high levels of sodium. There's a lot of misunderstanding about the sort of fear of sodium, high sodium diets because of its association with heart disease and other issues. If somebody already has hypertension or has a fluid retention problem or heart issues, and they're sedentary or they're older, yes, sodium is something that we need to be aware of. But people who are active, who are sweating a lot, who are really, really pushing athletics, have no need to to be afraid of any of those electrolytes, and in fact need to be actively pursuing.
I love that. Somebody's already asking about diet, and that was going to be our next topic. How can food help to improve hydration? How can food help to improve hydration? Dr. Sam?
It's definitely going to play a role. We actually get about 20% of our daily intake of water from our foods. And we've already, we've mentioned the fruits and the vegetables. You really get a good amount of water intake from those, like strawberries and cucumbers and broccoli, cauliflower, those things, they have a lot of water in them. And if you use the food, and that's not just the water is going to be the benefit when you actually use food for some of the hydration, you're going to get a lot of the essential nutrients that your body needs, some of the antioxidants that your body needs when you use the fruits and the vegetables. So it's more of an inclusive, holistic approach to the hydration when you use the healthier fruits and vegetables in your diet.
Pete?
Well, and to add to that also too, I mean, those fruits and vegetables tend to be high in fiber. So we've already talked about one part of the excretory system. So you might as well talk about the second. So if you have foods that are high in fiber, not only are they going to help you stay hydrated, but they're going to help, let's just say, move things along in your digestive tract, which is important. I mean, that really is essential, right? We talk about nutrition's food intake, but we have to understand that the second part of that equation is the output. And so when you eat high fiber, if you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, and that's helping you with electrolytes and helping you with hydration, it's also going to help keep your digestive tract running efficiently so you move the waste product out when it's time to go.
I love that. Alex?
Ooh. Sorry, I was answering a question in the chat. Yeah, I think Dr. Sam and Pete absolutely hit the nail on the head there, where we are consuming quite a bit more water from our diet than we think. And the more sort of stigma removing we can be about talking about our excretory processes. I just read Everybody Poops to my niece yesterday. And the more we can normalize those types of conversations and be frank about them and realize how vital these processes are for our body, not just from a performance standpoint, right? Sometimes it's easy to get myopic, especially I'm guilty of it as a strength coach, of only looking at things in terms of performance, right? And it's easy to then provide more data or evidence seeing, okay, if you're not doing X, Y, Z, this is how much your performance will drop. But just from a health and wellness standpoint, and I believe it's, Blake, who has been posting some really good information in the chat, that if we're not checking these very basic boxes where we're not peeing the way that we should be, we're not consuming fluids the way we should be, fiber, we're not having normal GI movements, health and wellness simply isn't there. And since that's really has to be the sort of baseline, whether someone wants to be a serious athlete or not, these are low-hanging fruit, unintended, that if we're just making them a point of emphasis, everything is so much easier.
I love that. Great, great, great. So how do you identify if somebody is hydrated? Like if you're teaching a group X class or you're training somebody one, what are some of the signs of dehydration that you can spot right away? Dr. Sam?
Increase excessive fatigue, confusion, they may be lethargic. Those are, external signs besides you having to go to the bathroom and look at their pee. But those are some of the things that you want to look for. If they have a lot of dry mouth, if they're complaining of that, those are already signs that they, may be dehydrated.
And so, Pete, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that, or?
Well, just the responsiveness, like how responsive are they? And that's one thing, depending on what time of day, and again, depending on temperature, I ask people if they're well hydrated, and just trying to get them in that mindset of drink water. And it's also too, especially if people are going to be coming to a class, it's going to be later in the afternoon. I will tell people in like a 5 o'clock class or 6 o'clock class, hey, start hydrating at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Start filling up your water bottle at your desk just so you can come here and be ready to rock and roll. And that just, some people don't think about it, but I try to give everybody thinking like an athlete, right? You're coming in and taking a class that I'm thinking indoor cycling specifically. you're coming in and taking an indoor cycling class at 5 or 6. Well, you need to kind of walk back 3 or 4 hours and look at hydrating. And depending on how you feel about nutrition, is having a snack an hour to an hour and a half before you come in, so you feel somewhat ready to rock and roll. Because there's nothing worse than showing up into a class, you're fatigued, you're not hydrated, you didn't eat, and just, yeah, you're not going to get the benefit of the workout.
Perfect. Alex, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I like to sort of talk about hydration in terms of the way I talk about sleep, in that you can't fake it, right? Your body's not lying to you. If you don't feel good, if you feel crummy and you've got mood disturbance and a headache and your delayed reaction time and you don't want to put heavy weight on the bar, and your body is telling you something, and one of the prime culprits is that you probably are not hydrating. So one of the sort of beauties of auto-regulation or intuitive training, paying attention to the signals that your body is sending you, it's a pretty clear sign that something is off. And oftentimes it's one of those simple things like drinking enough water that we take for granted. I do want to take a quick moment to bust a myth regarding cramping, because I've seen that mentioned a couple times within the chat. Cramping is not caused by dehydration. Now, there's a lot of misunderstandings around that, because the initial research that found that correlation was looking at miners right around the turn of the 20th century, where going into coal shafts are extremely hot, and they had a much higher rate of cramping than general population. Saw that they were excreting high levels of sodium in their sweat. It was, they must be dehydrated. Instead, it's a confounding variable where you are more likely to cramp in hot environments, or environments where you are at a lower hydration status due to fatigue. The best idea right now, we actually don't fully understand the entire mechanisms of cramping. We have to differentiate between true cramping and muscle spasms, but both are mostly indirect spinal reflexes due to central fatigue, which is very different from being tired, right? Fatigue means a reduction in voluntary muscle activation. So while you will see cramping in scenarios where hydration status may be a challenge, or we may be in hot environments, the correlation does not equal causation in that regard, and it's simply something that happens sort of in parallel. But dehydration is not the direct mechanism for why and how we cramp.
That's awesome. Pete, do you want to add anything to that? No, that's pretty. Dr. Sam, are you good?
It's pretty good. I mean, also magnesium too is kind of correlated sometimes to when you have muscle cramps. So a lot of times it's an imbalance between electrolytes and not necessarily, like you said, dehydration.
I love that. So somebody in the class is dehydrated. What's the quick remedy? What's the quickest remedy? Somebody's feeling dizzy, foggy. What's the quickest remedy? Pete?
That remedy number one is stop exercising. Stop exercising, sit down, try to get them something to drink. And we were talking about this before we started. I've heard that sometimes if you drink water that's too cold, and I can't remember the source for this, is that it doesn't hydrate immediately, because your body has to kind of warm it up to allow it to flow into the tissue. So it might stay in your stomach a little bit longer. Whether that's 100% true, but number one, stop exercising. Number two, start hydrating. And again, depending on the heat, are they hot? Because we've all been in the Group X studio when the air conditioner breaks and it's running, and the mirrors start steaming up. You get, condensation on the floor, and that can easily happen, especially on the East Coast or in the humid part of the year. So it's get them out of the heat, sit them down, get them somewhere cool. And at worst case scenario, or if somebody's really having a heat stroke, get something cold on their neck and on their wrists. Because if you start cooling down the neck and you start cooling down the wrists, you can start lowering core temperature a lot faster. So number one, stop exercising. Number two, start hydrating. And then number three, look at how can you start bringing that core temperature down if they are overheating.
Great advice. Dr. Sam, do you want to add anything? Or
that pretty much hit the nail on the head. Definitely agree with that. As far as decrease the activity, get them off their feet, rest, and get them as much fluid as possible.
It's funny you admit. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, there was a myth. There's a lot of discussion whether you should be drinking water that's ice cold or room temperature. And I think, Alex, you were kind of elaborating a little bit more on that as well.
Yeah, I've seen some of the same information that Pete has. The take home I've seen is really that if there is a difference, it's negligible. And at the end of the day, probably not something to worry about. Perhaps not ice cold prior to directly prior to exercise, simply because of the decrease in gastric emptying. But for myself personally, I like really cold water simply because I run hot. My wife calls me a furnace. So there is an aspect of personal preference. And if that helps you, then it's certainly something that you can consider. But I've also heard myths there in terms of, burning calories to warm up the water to your body temperature, and there really isn't any evidence supporting that. So yeah, so any of those differences really are negligible. And I think that Dr. Sam and Pete both really hit the nail on the head in terms of, if someone in an acute exercise event is having trouble, we're stopping right away, and following some of those basic steps.
I love that. Blake said some sources recommend a few complex carbohydrates along with water and electrolytes for hydration and especially recovery. Have any of you experienced with this or have any experience with this, Pete?
Well, no, I'm just thinking that obviously, a carbohydrate, what a carbohydrate will do in post-recovery is help get glycogen back into the muscle cells quicker for recovery tomorrow. But I'm thinking, people have to realize that so porter beers are called porters because they were served to the stevedores who unloaded the ships in London, the London docks. And literally, if you look at beer has the carbohydrate ratio of about 3-to-1 carbohydrate to protein that has been recommended in some of the research literature for recovery. And there's a reason why a lot of cyclists here in San Diego will finish up a 100-mile ride at a brewery so they can get some carbohydrate in there. And having been a rugby player and a rugby coach for a number of years, there's a certain subculture of drinking beer within our sport. But the thing is, what I try to get people to think about, for every pint of beer, if you are going to consume beer, you should be drinking at least a pint of water along with that. And the other thing with beer is obviously there's alcohol, and that might not agree with some people, and the calories in beer might negate the reason why you're working out. But if you're just out for a good workout and you're looking to have fun, anything you do for a recovery drink, some kind of carbohydrate, whether it's going to be in the drink or some kind of carbohydrate snack, all that's going to do is help speed up the recovery process. And the way you got to look at it, as soon as you start cooling down, and I can't remember where I picked this up, but as soon as, if I start cooling down now, that begins my workout tomorrow. Right, so how I cool down right now determines how I train tomorrow. The rehydration, refueling, rest, all that will determine how much energy I have and how my workout's going to be tomorrow. So I always tell people, if you want to feel bad and have a crappy workout, skip the cool down, skip the post-exercise recovery, and you'll feel like you had a great workout. But really, you'll just be feeling miserable and be running on an empty tank.
I love that. Anybody want to add anything? Alex, or?
Yeah, there was actually an RCT, a randomized controlled trial that came out late August, I think, that was examining post-exercise, right? We're not saying drink a beer mid-set, right? But post-exercise, there were 3 groups. One was water only, one was beer only, I believe 2 servings, and another group was a 1-to-1 of water and beer. And they were looking at post-exercise hydration status, glycogen repletion, and muscle protein synthesis rates. And the beer only was the worst group, right, in terms of those outcomes. But beer and water came out as superior to water alone. Now, we're not saying that drinking your favorite IPA is an ergogenic aid, right? But it does show the role that carbohydrates have in most of our exercise, unless we are performing steady state aerobic exercise for really long periods of time. Most of our physical activity is going to rely on carbohydrates as the main fuel. So the more we can do to replete that, even outside of specific hydration, the better off we're going to be from both a recovery and potentially muscle building standpoint. So they are important things to consider.
I love that. I love it. Do you want to add anything, doctor?
I don't know a lot about the using of the beer. I use something that is called our Sport and Go, and this is something that does have like low carbs, and it really has more electrolytes to help people, and it also has a nice taste to it. So I use that to really help replenish electrolytes. And it has like ashwagandha and ginger and turmeric and magnesium, so things like that. I've seen with my clients that I, help in my environment can really benefit from something like that. I don't know a lot about the research with the beer, so that was interesting, Pete and Alex. But I like the Sport and Go that I use with my clients.
Well, and the only reason why I mention that is just because you see carbohydrate, and I think sometimes in fitness we're way too serious about. I mean, we look at this stuff and we're way too serious about it. I mean, let's remember, a lot of people are just exercising for fun as a stress relief, and I wouldn't want anybody. And I mean, we've all taught those classes on like a Thursday or Friday evening, or even on a Sunday morning, where you have a great class and then you go out to brunch. And so it's being realistic with, let's look at people's lifestyles. I mean, doesn't mean I'm going to say go out and drink a 6-pack after class, but it'd be acknowledging that would a 16 ounce pint of beer be the worst thing after you work out? No, it wouldn't be the worst thing if it's in conjunction with a number of other things. It's not the only thing by any stretch, but I also want to be realistic and say, hey, it does have a role like anything else in moderation. Doesn't mean go do keg stands after you get done working out. That's not at all what I'm suggesting. It just means to understand that we got to be practical with what our clients are going to do.
I love that. And we're running out of time, but we have one last question, and I want to kind of know what the panel feels about that. What do you feel about Gatorade? What do you feel about Gatorade as a post-workout? Alex, you kind of wrote it in there, but why don't you say it?
Yeah, in general, for most people, Gatorade and Powerade tend to have more sugar than is necessary. Normally, if you're looking at like what's an ideal mix for example, like somebody running a marathon, having something around, I think it's around 5 to 8% carbohydrate is ideal. Gatorade is normally twice that. And for someone who's exercising vigorously, that can actually lead to some GI distress. So typically cutting Gatorade with water, or I'm a little bit more of a fan of Pedialyte. But even there, cutting it with water is oftentimes a good way to go. And none of those beverages are necessary. So that's really the biggest take home, is that you do not need Gatorade or Powerade to be able to maintain your hydration status.
I love that. I love it. So we basically, Cynthia, you want to add? Dr. Sam? Sorry.
Yeah, I am not a proponent, an advocate of the Gatorade. Just like Alex said, it's so unnecessary, high in carbs and sugars. And a lot of clients that I work with, they're trying to lose weight, as well. So that is an unnecessary carb and sugar intake, where you can find something much more better for getting your hydration in versus Gatorade and Powerades. Like the Sport and Go. So,
well, my go-to is I'll get the store brand, the generic brand sports drink, because those are usually watered down. And to Alex's point, I always mix it on a 2-to-1 water to sports drink. And personally, the only time I really recommend it is if anybody's going to be out, like the cyclists that I know they're going to be going out for like a 90-minute ride. Anything more than 90 minutes in the heat, that's when I think a sports drink. If you're going to be out for a 90-minute ride or a long run or whatever, yeah, that's when maybe a sports drink could help the absorption a little bit quicker. But anything less than an hour, generally typical workout, sports drinks aren't necessary.
I love that. Okay, so we've got basically 2 minutes left. So any advice to get these people, our clients, to drink more water? Any other advice you would like to give them to end this awesome panel with? Alex, let's start with you.
I'll just sort of reiterate, I think the biggest thing that you can do, it seems like such a first world problem type thing but we're lazy, right? If you always have a blender bottle or any type of bottle you want, but if you always have this as sort of your companion and it's with you everywhere you go, that removes the single biggest excuse or laziness factor of, well, there is always water near me no matter what. And if you can just build that into your life, you bring your phone everywhere with you, well, why not bring your blender bottle too?
Love that. Dr. Sam.
Totally agree. I love to have my flask with me. It keeps my water just at the temperature I like. Find what works for you. There's different apps as well. We are so high in technology. If you need to have an app on your phone to remind you to drink water, or find what works for you. If you're that person that needs a little extra boost, a little alarm, there's water tracking apps that you can use. But really just think about drinking a glass before you eat a meal. Okay, drink a glass right when you wake up in the morning to hydrate your system. Drink a glass right before bed. Just to really help you get a schedule. Get on a schedule for your water, just like we get on a schedule to do everything else in life. We go to work, we take care of the kids, we make sure we're on a schedule. Put yourself on a schedule to make sure you get that water in, because it's so important.
And I never leave home without my hydro flask. Because Alex's point, I used to do plastic bottles all the time, but I started feeling guilty about that. So yeah, this is just key. And if you can see it, well, it has dents and dings and bumps all over it from getting dropped. So it just becomes a habit. And once it becomes a habit, it just helps you be a little bit healthier. It can help your clients be a little bit healthier.
I love it. Well, I want to thank my panel. Amazing information. They made me look good tonight. I want to thank all of you that tuned in today. It was very important. Remember, this has been recorded, so it will be sent out to you probably tomorrow, the next 24 hours, so you can rewatch it. I want to thank SCW, Chris, for doing an amazing job tonight, and Sarah, I hope you're having a great time. Thanks, you guys. Have a good night. Take care, guys. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you so much.